Hey, Jack.
Hey, Trevor, how are you?
I'm doing great. Welcome back to Hey, Jack, Leadership Reflections with Jack Nehlig. Jack, I'm not going to let you off easy today. I have a really interesting topic. I've had this on the list, waiting to talk to you about this. And it's really about decision making and more so decision making under pressure. In leadership, we're making constant decisions daily. A lot of these are under pressure. How can we make decisions under pressure, but more so, how do we make how do we make confident calls or confident decisions, especially when we have limited information? We're kind of always balancing speed versus quality, especially depending on the nature of what the
Yeah.
decision is about. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I think I would counter one thought you said there that, a lot of your decisions are under pressure as a leader. I think it's the other way around. Probably 80% of your decisions you're doing in the flow and they're simple things. Like your people have to come to you for expenditures over 25,000. So you look at it and you say, go, right? People make decisions every day as a leader, but the ones under pressure, yeah, are very difficult to deal with. And they don't happen every day, but maybe once a month, a real decision under pressure happens and you've got to execute. And it's a tough art, if you will. So anyway, it's a good topic. I agree. It's a good topic. Um, First of all, I think everybody should realize decisions under pressure are hard and it isn't easy. So if you face one and it doesn't feel good, that's okay. I mean, it's this, but it's the old. That's why they give you the big bucks. Your people are happy to give you that very difficult decision because they don't want to do it, or there's stuff surrounding you that is causing you to make a tough decision, a hard decision, one that's maybe too fast paced. So yeah, remember this. It's not going to always feel right. Number one, and number two, that's what you're paid for, is to make the tough decisions. So it's what we do. So my first recommendation when you face a tough decision, the and one that's probably under pressure, is you should look at it in the context of the vision and the mission and the purpose of the company. So in other words, first thing you want to do is step way back from the decision. Get yourself oriented around this decision and how it affects the vision, mission, and purpose of the company, right? You want to be aligned if you can. And that's a great first step to get your mind heading in the right direction. The second thing I always tell myself before I make a tough decision is that you got to accept if it doesn't go right. You got to be confident enough to make that decision and know, and you can even admit it to your team, look, we're going to do this, not this, and it may not go well, but it's my decision and here are the reasons why, right? And because of that, if you're concerned, now sometimes after thinking through the data and interacting with your team and developing the thought process and then facing the decision, sometimes it feels right, so you don't have to worry about it feeling wrong. But if it is feeling like it was a complete jump ball or could go wrong, but you have to go that way, it is good to ask your team, if you are making that decision, to start working on a plan B if it goes wrong. What will be our damage control if it goes wrong? Not to fake anybody out, but to be prepared and ready to take the next step, the next decision that's going to be needed. And the other thing I would say on these tough decisions, usually it plays out in the next month or two, and you were either right or you were wrong. On all those wrongs, it's a pretty simple story. You go do postmortems with your team or your boss or whoever to figure out what went wrong, figure out why you made the decision the way you did. And now I'd also give you two Other thoughts on making those tough decisions? Keep in mind sometimes, not always, and you can't overuse this one, by the way. So this is a caution and can actually be a problem. But sometimes no decision is the right decision. Very many times, no decision is not the right decision. Your people are coming for your decision. You need to make one. But sometimes in a big scenario that you're building and you're trying to understand the tapestry of this decision and all the implications that are going to happen when you make the decision, if you've given these two choices about your team, you might always consider a third choice, and that is if we do nothing. Because it gives you at least a baseline, and they're going to describe all the horrible things that are going to happen if you do nothing. And then compare them to the horrible things that are going to happen if you do something. Right? So I always thought through secretly, privately, most of the time, not out loud with everybody, but what would be the consequences if I did nothing? Just kick the can down the road. Okay. Now, again, do not use that. No one should use that as a normal operating methodology, because I know managers have been highly criticized for never making good decisions or never making decisions. And that's right. They should be criticized because their job is to help make decisions. So, but in the big tough ones, keep in mind a no decision scenario, because it might actually be right in the end. And then the other thing you can do, other than analyzing the decision and making the hard decision, is if you really aren't comfortable with it, you can punt up. You can
you explain that further?
Yep. You can go to your boss and say, look, boss, I know this is my decision to make. It's under my responsibility, but I need to describe for you a scenario on my options because I'm not comfortable making this decision. And you go to your boss, and sometimes the boss will listen to the story with you, recommend the path or recommend one further action to go get more data or something. Or they might just say, well, if you really want me to make this decision for you, I will. Now, again, that's one you don't want to abuse. But really, from time to time, that's the right thing to do, because you're also in that process filling your boss in on what's about to happen.
Yeah, very important.
And they may not know what's about to happen. Because even your boss at that point might say, wait a minute, we're also going to affect this other area of the company too. Maybe I better talk to my peer, get their feedback. And then all of a sudden, your boss is sort of semi-owning it, goes to his or her peer, they discuss it, they come back, give you some more information, or they tell you, hey, we like plan number 2 and we'll back you. You know what I mean? Now, all of a sudden, you've gotten this sort of semi-monkey off your back. You didn't, but you went to your boss and got a lot of feedback and or said to them you just weren't comfortable making that decision. And that might be the right thing to do there too. So that's probably it. There are frameworks in companies that talk about how to make decisions, and those frameworks typically are just a lot of basic feedback templates and getting information and making sure you have alternatives. And then in good project management work, there are these great spreadsheets where you weight criteria and fill in data and compare option A, B, and C. But those really aren't the kind of decision we're talking about, I don't think. I think these are decisions that kind of happen because nothing fits. The system isn't working for this decision. And you have to rely on your judgment, and someone has to make the out-of-process decision that's got to be done. So I don't know. Those are my reflections on making difficult decisions or making decisions that have some high impact.
Yeah, I think those are great inputs and considerations as well. I love the one about punting up. The first thing I think of is that you had referenced it then is it keeps everybody in the loop, and there is a effect that kind of happens because of that, which is it takes a lot of the stress off of you,
Yeah.
knowing we're all in this boat, we're all rowing to the same way. Everyone is aware of the consequences. So you just individually don't feel like if this doesn't go right, all this is coming down on me. There's a lot to be said about getting everybody on board. Everybody understands the consequences. I will add to this that there's really two things here that I did and still do today going through decisions. The first that's the most helpful is that I try to think of the second order consequences. You had mentioned, this might affect other departments or other individuals. I like to think of this as well as, okay, there's more to this decision than meets the eye. And I remember in a lot of the all employee meetings, one a year, you used to always say, there's another story to be told here when we review data and so forth. And I kind of like to think of that as, hey, with this decision, what are just some second order consequences here that this will impact downstream? Because that could also then factor into the upside if things go right, or even the downside accordingly. The second thing that somebody mentioned this to me early in my leadership career when it comes to decisions. They had mentioned I was going through a scenario with a decision to be made, and I said, I'm kind of struggling with this because I don't want to be wrong. And they said, you're a great decision maker. And it kind of didn't click a little bit. And I probed a little bit further, and they said, you're a great decision maker, not based on the results that you have on the decisions, but through the process and the due diligence that you take. And since then, that kind of scoped for me personally how I like to think about decisions is that sometimes, it's you can't be results oriented. You got to step back and work through the process and detach yourself from it and make it based on the information that you have that you truly believe in, and know that it's not going to go right sometimes.
Yeah. Two more thoughts came to mind while you were talking, Trevor. The questioning or your thought on punting up, how you liked I made that we use that phrase punting up. It just reminded me I did have one decision framework I always used. And that was I just at least organized every decision I had to make in one of three buckets. And the first bucket was decisions I made and didn't tell my boss about.
Okay.
Because they're just in flow.
Yeah.
That he or she would respect me and expect me to do those decisions. So when I look at the decision, is it one? Okay, no. Then number two is a decision I made, and then afterward I told my boss about. I was going to make it myself. I was confident in my decision, but felt they needed to know that I did it. And that might be because it had second order consequences. In other words, it might ripple in some other department. And then the third level of a decision was decisions I would go to my boss with my decision, but before I made it, in case my boss wanted to change it or adapt it or tell me no.
Yeah.
So that I should have mentioned that earlier. That is the framework I used in my head. And then one other thought came to mind too. It's often debated in decision making: is it better to be fast or is it better to be right? Right. I mean, but not really right versus fast. I mean, you can be fast and right, but it's kind of the thought of, do you wait and collect too much data? In other words, it takes too long to make a decision versus a certain lower amount of data and being fast with your decisions. And I'm a big fan of the fast because I've seen too many times where the slow just kills people's momentum, their motivation. The problem gets worse. Lots of weird things happen. If you keep sending them back, get me more, get me more, get me more, get me more, loops. It's okay. I always felt it's okay to ask them to go get one more. I always had a one more rule. Like, they brought me the data. We looked at the scenario. We all talked about it. And then I said, well, okay, look, I'm not comfortable yet unless you get me this one more piece of
One
data.
more.
And they would come back and I'd say, look, when you give me that data, I promise you I'll make the decision. And then 2 days later, they come running back. They got the data. We all discuss it. We make the decision. That's an okay delay. But making them keep coming back and or giving them too big of a task to get you too much data, it's not the right way to go. So in a weird way, I'm fast versus slow. Fast is always better.
Yeah, and then that creates decision paralysis, and
Yeah.
you got a team of a bunch of researchers then.
Yep, exactly.
It's anything. So
Exactly.
I love this. I love the content bucket or the buckets there, decision tree that you kind of put that under. And I would just put this out to all the listeners out there. If you have a process for your decision making as well that you find helpful, we'd love to hear. Drop us a comment or shoot us an email. Just always trying to learn with this, but I think that insight, Jack, is tremendous. With decision making, and so I appreciate you sharing that today.
Okay, I really enjoyed it too.
Awesome. All right, guys, thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Take care, everybody. Go lead.